Hello everyone, and welcome to my channel for those of you who are new. This is an incredible find that the Lord has showed me. And I don't know, possibly some of you already know about this, but I was surprised and shocked by the Masoretic Text, which is part of most of our translation, our English version translations of our Old Testament Bibles. That's where they came from. The Masoretic Text, which they have pawned off as being Hebrew, which it is not. And the fact that it has magic within the fake Hebrew alphabet letters, which it comprises. And yes, that is shocking. And yes, that is hard to believe. But I am going to show you how the Lord showed me the truth and prove it to you in this video. I'm going to actually show you. So you can do your own research if you want to. I welcome you to do that so you can see for yourself, being guided by the power of the Holy Spirit, to have the Lord show you exactly what he showed me, and maybe even more than what he showed me. I'm going to try to make this video as short as I can, but it's going to be kind of hard because there's a lot of information in here. So just to let you know, just to prepare you beforehand, you may want to take some small breaks because it may be long. I don't know, but I'm going to try to do my best, because this is important to me and it's important to the Lord to get this truth out there. Because so many leading scholars and Bible teachers and pastors of large organizations and mega churches, and particularly within the Protestant denomination, push this Masoretic text as being infallible, as being perfect. And it is far from that, let me tell you. And just a little background about me, for those of you that don't know me, I am more familiar with my New Testament than my Old Testament, but I've certainly read my Bible several times. And I, like many of you, when I would go and look up specific words and phrases in the Bible, I would go to places like Blue Letter Bible, which showed me in the Old Testament, the Masoretic Text would pop up, and it would show you the translation, which they called Hebrew, and what that word or phrase of words is from English that we're reading, and what the actual Hebrew meaning is. And I believe, like many of you, that it is accurate and it is infallible, and I trusted everything that I was led to believe about it. But now I feel differently about it, and I'm going to tell you why. Okay, so here we go. I want to start off, because this is important. Many of you know these scriptures, but some of you don't. I want to go over these really quickly, because before we get into the Masoretic Text and the Masorites who wrote it and who they are, we need to talk about the Pharisees. So, and you'll see the connection, hopefully, as I go through this video. So we have Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees. I've lumped them all together. So in the Bible, mostly Jesus is here talking in different verses about describing who the Pharisees, scribes, and Sadducees are. So I'm just going to read these off to you. Lots of descriptions, so we'll just go through this. They are serpents, brood of vipers. They are not the children of Abraham, but children of the devil. They teach man-made doctrines called the traditions of the elders that make God's word void. They teach doctrines of the flesh and not God's law, which is of the heart and the spirit. They are blind guides. They are an evil and adulterous generation. They don't produce fruit. They lay heavy burdens on people's shoulders but are unwilling to move them. They are prideful, boastful, arrogant, deceptive, hypocritical, judgmental. They love being called rabbi, even though Jesus warned against this. And here are some of the 7 woes that Jesus directed at them. You know, where he starts off and he says, "Woe to you, Pharisees." Okay? "You shut up the kingdom of heaven in people's faces, not allowing those who would enter to go in, neither entering themselves. You make proselytes, which are religious converts, twice as much a child of hell as they are. You are full of greed and self-indulgence. Woe to you! Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! You are whitewashed tombs, pristine on the outside, but inside full of dead people's bones, and all uncleanness, full of lawlessness. Woe to you, scribes and Pharisees! All the righteous blood shed on earth comes upon them, from the blood of Abel to that of Zechariah." All Jesus talking about the Pharisees, scribes and Sadducees. Okay? And then we have, in Revelation 2:9, Jesus describes those in one of the churches who say they are Jews but are of the synagogue of Satan. Okay? So that's a church that is in Revelation, which is future time, not in Jesus' time, for those of you who don't know the book of Revelation. It was a prophecy given to John after Jesus died. And it describes the end times. Okay? So we know there's a church out there right now that exists on the earth that call themselves Jews but are the synagogue of Satan. And with that in mind, let's go on. Okay. Well, what is Rabbinic Judaism? I don't really know much about Rabbinic Judaism. Okay? Now, we're talking about this because we're going to talk about who the Masoretes were that wrote the Masoretic Text. Okay? The Rabbinic Judaism originated in the 2nd century, that's AD. It came from the Jewish Pharisees. Okay? The Talmud is the rabbinic writings known as oral law, and these writings became a core part of Judaism for rabbinic Jews. The Hebrew scriptures are interpreted through the Talmud. Okay? So the important thing here I want you to know is we have the Pharisees, and now we have the rabbis in rabbinic Judaism who represent Judaism with the Talmud and their rabbinic teachings, writings known as the oral law, which is all in the Talmud. Okay? Here's the Masoretes. They're the ones that wrote the Masoretic Text, which started in around 5th, 6th century AD, and they finished it in about 1000 AD. Okay? The Masoretes, and then this is the literal translation of this word, are the masters of the tradition. Remember what Jesus said about the Pharisees, who are the Masoretes, because they are the rabbinical Jews, which you're going to see in a minute. They love their laws, their oral man-made traditions. And here the Masoretes are the masters of the traditions. And they were a group of Jewish scribe scholars, okay, rabbis. Who worked from around the end of the 5th through the 10th centuries CE, which is AD, based primarily in medieval Israel in the cities of Tiberias and Jerusalem, as well as in Iraq, Babylonia. Oh, look, Babylon. Yes. Modern-day Iraq, which was Babylon. And what were located in these cities? Academies. Academies where rabbis taught and students learned the Talmud, Rabbinic Judaism. Remember I showed you that, okay? The Masoretes were part of it. These are the modern day Pharisees. The oral traditions that the Pharisees taught were finally written down in around 200 AD. Okay? The first was called the Mishnah. And those were the oral laws and traditions that the Jews finally wanted to have written down. Okay? Because previously it was passed on orally by the Pharisees, etc. Okay? So part of that necessitated the development of these academies to teach it, to learn it, to have it written down. Okay, so first was the Mishnah. It was written in 200 AD, and then following that was the rest of the Talmud, which the Mishnah is comprised of, which is basically the commentaries, the rabbinic commentaries on the Mishnah, the law, which is called the Gemara, and they were written around 500 AD. Okay, but it all is the Talmud altogether. Okay. So that's basically what I wanted to show you about that. So I want to stop you for a second. Now that you know who the Masoretes really are, modern day Pharisees, I showed you that. I showed you the connection between Rabbinic Judaism, which they are a part of, and the Pharisees. Okay? Why on earth would any Christian, knowing what Jesus taught and showed us, what I just showed you, all the scriptures about who the Pharisees are, why would any of us want to read anything coming from them, written from them, passed down by them, translated by them? Why? If Jesus was alive today, would he be reading out of a Masoretic text, which is written by modern day Pharisees? Would Paul? Would any of the disciples? I don't think so. So you got to really sit here and seriously think about this one, because I did. Jesus wants us to have nothing to do with the Pharisees. They are children of hell. And their Masoretic text is produced by them. So, that alone should have huge red flags and warning signs to you about your Masoretic text, which is your Old Testament, which has been translated into English from the Masoretic text. You should be highly having a red flag going off right now about that. I personally will never ever read my Old Testament English Standard Version again. Okay? I have my Septuagint, which we'll talk about in a second. My Septuagint, which has been translated into English from Greek. Okay? Which is a lot different than Masoretic text. I mean, yeah, there's a lot that's similar, but there's differences. Okay? So anyway, that alone should just stop you. I shouldn't even have to keep going about these Masoretes, modern day Pharisees. That's what they are. But I'm going to, because there's a lot more to them and their Masoretic text. Okay. So, how many of you knew this? Not me. In 300 BC, the Hebrew language died. It became extinct. Yeah. Through mass language conversions and failed restoration attempts. And what we had was the rise of the Greek Septuagint, which I just talked about. So outside Judea, about 300 BC. Inside Judea, about 200 BC. Except Jerusalem temple elites up to 70 AD, because in 70 AD the second temple was destroyed. But then Hebrew for sure died. Okay, and then We'll just read a little bit too. I'm not going to read all this. It says the extinction of the Hebrew language in 300 BC of the world population of Jews created a spiritual vacuum and the need for a Greek version of the Hebrew scriptures. The Septuagint filled this spiritual void for the tiny group of hungry remnant of Jews who began reading the Torah in Alexandria, Egypt, in their homes in small groups, and this synagogue was born. Everywhere the Greek Septuagint was distributed through the world as synagogue was born. At the time of Jesus, the Messiah branch, son of David, Hebrew had already been a dead language for 300 years. The tiny remnant who spoke Hebrew were the Jerusalem temple elites that included the high priest and his associates, Sadducees, but all these were wiped out in 70 AD. Okay? A small remnant of Hebrew-speaking Jews lived at Zabori and Tiberias, who became known to us as the Masoretes, but these went extinct in 1000 AD. After 1000 AD, nobody on earth spoke Hebrew until it was restored in 1915, magically restored in 1915, which makes absolutely no sense. You don't have to be a linguist and study languages all your life to know that absolutely makes no sense. A totally dead language 300 years before Jesus suddenly pops out of nowhere and they know exactly how to speak it correctly and be restored in 1915? I don't think so. Okay. So let's go here. Text. In biblical studies, the text is a theorized original uniform text of the Hebrew Bible, the Tanakh, preceding both the Septuagint and the Masoretic Text. Since the 19th century, there has been much scholarly work to regain this text. The theory that there was an text was advocated by Paul de Lagarde. Today, it is disputed that there ever was such a uniform text. It may also more generally refer to any text. Okay, look at this. The interrelationship between various significant ancient manuscripts of the Old Testament, some identified by their siglum. The lowermost text, which is in parentheses lost, would be the text. So here's the text, which they theorized didn't exist. But let me ask you this. Use your common sense. What was the Septuagint translated from? Did it come out of thin air? The Septuagint was written in Greek, actually Koine Greek. So where do they get the scriptures from to be translated into Greek? It was obviously in Hebrew. Moses wrote it, or parts of it. So it had to exist. You can't write out of thin air. So it was lost. Okay? And as I did my research, I could not find any original, not Masoretic text, that they claim is original, but any original. Okay? Original Hebrew. I can't find anything online that exists, because it doesn't, because it's right here. It's lost. Okay? That the Septuagint was translated from. That's what I mean. That original Hebrew that the Septuagint was translated from. It's gone. So here it is. The lost Hebrew Bible. So here's the Septuagint. Okay? And then these are the offshoots from the Septuagint, the translations. Look at this. So here's the original. And then here's another original from the original, or a copy, I should say, from the original. Sorry, that's lost. And then here's another copy that's lost. And then we have the Masoretic text over here. Are you kidding me? Look. Original lost, copy of the original lost, another copy lost. Oh, but we got the Masoretic text. This should be a red flag warning. Actually, way back when I showed you who the Masorites were, that was your red flag warning. Here's another big, huge red flag of the many I'm going to continue to show you about the Masoretes and their Masoretic text. Do you really want to read an Old Testament Bible based on a Masoretic text with all these lost translations when you have the Septuagint right here, which you can get, which I have? What will go on? Septuagint. The Septuagint, sometimes referred to as the Greek Old Testament, the translation of the 70, it was abbreviated LXX, is the earliest extant Greek translation of the Hebrew Bible from the original Hebrew. I can go and look up Masoretic text for you right now, but for the sake of time, I'm not. It doesn't say that. It doesn't say anything about it being translated from the original Hebrew. You know why? Because I just showed you why. It was lost, and the copies were lost. Okay? Here's the next one. The significance of the Septuagint. The significance of the Septuagint translation can hardly be overestimated. Following the conquest of Alexander the Great in 336-323 BC, Greek became the official language of Egypt, Syria, and the eastern end of the Mediterranean Sea. The Septuagint translation made the Hebrew scriptures available both to the Jews who no longer spoke their ancestral language and to the entire Greek-speaking world. The Septuagint was later to become the Bible of the Greek-speaking early church and is frequently quoted in the New Testament. Yeah, even to this day, the Greek Orthodox Christians and non-Greek Orthodox Christians, Eastern, not on here in the West, but in the East, Europe, etc., they rejected the Masoretic text because they didn't want anything written by Pharisees, modern day Pharisees. They rejected it straight out. And they embraced their Septuagint, which Jesus and the disciples, if they were literate, read out of. Okay? There was no Hebrew scroll that Jesus read out of. Sorry, it's gone. It's lost. I showed you. So, would you rather read a Pharisee text or a Greek text, a Septuagint text that Jesus read from? It's kind of a no-brainer. List of Hebrew Bible manuscripts. Okay, describes what a Hebrew Bible manuscript is. Okay, here. The earliest sources, whether oral or written, of the Hebrew Bible disappeared over time because of the fragility of media, wars, especially the destruction of the first temple, which was in 6th century BC, and the second temple in 70 AD, 70 AD, and other intentional destructions. Okay? As a result, the lapse of time between the original manuscripts and their surviving copies is much longer than in the case of the New Testament manuscripts. Well, I've just showed you there aren't any. And I've tried to look and find them. I can't find them. Why is that? Because they were destroyed. The temple was destroyed in 70 AD, and it was destroyed in the first century as well. That's why it doesn't exist. If God wanted Hebrew to survive, it would have survived. Jesus didn't even speak Hebrew. The disciples didn't speak Hebrew. They were speaking Greek and Aramaic. Okay. I showed you. Hebrew was a dead language. Here is an actual picture of the Masoretic text. Okay? This is what it looks like. The Hebrew, they're saying Hebrew letters. And see the dots? There's these dots and there's these lines underneath. We'll talk about that in a minute. Well, I can talk about it right now, I guess. Let me scroll down. Okay. Here's some things about it. The Masoretic texts have vowel marks, unlike English, because Hebrew has only consonants. There weren't any vowels. So when the Masorites wrote their text, they devised and implemented a system of marks which serve as vowels. They have marks called cantillation, which indicates how words should be pronounced or chanted, because they believe in chanting words. You know, we can talk about chanting, and we can talk about magic, and we can talk about the occult, because in occult practices, they chant. Okay, but we'll get there, because you're going to see the connection with the occult. And give me 1 second, because I have to plug in my computer. It's going to die. Okay. The fifth is the Masoretic text have punctuation. So basically what I showed you, the little, excuse me. Oh, and I forgot to show you this. The little dots, you can kind of see them here. We go back to the top. The dots, the dashes, and all that. That's what the Masorites developed, and this fake Hebrew. We'll get into that in a minute, where it came from. So down here, the Leningrad Codex, which is the Masoretic text, is the oldest complete manuscript of the Hebrew Bible in Hebrew. Manuscripts earlier than the 13th century are very rare. The majority of the manuscripts have survived in fragmentary condition. Okay? And it talks about a Torah scroll around 1250. Okay? But the Masoretic text was written in 1000 AD, so it was available then. And if you look right here, this is the Masoretic text. This is a sample of it. This is the oldest complete Hebrew Bible that they have. The Leningrad Codex. Okay? Masoretic text. And I showed you already that Hebrew, I showed you, Hebrew written and spoken was gone at this point. Okay? It ceased, it started to not be spoken around 300 AD going forward. You know, only by 70 AD, nobody spoke it. And there are no original Hebrew manuscripts, scrolls showing the original Hebrew and what it was that the Septuagint was translated from into Greek. Okay? I showed you that. Okay. So, let me show you this. So I showed you the vowel points, the markings, okay? And I showed you that this was what the Masorites were known for those vowel points, to show that there were actually vowels, you know, and to how to translate them. Well, they weren't new to all this. In the Syrian languages, which are part of the Semitic languages which Hebrew comes from, they also have a system of marking dots above and below letters based on an older system to indicate vowel sounds not found in the script. So I'll show you some of these. See? The Masorites were not new at developing this. It predated the Masorites. They were doing this before. Okay? This is 1 AD. but actually it's based on an older system. So it's been around a long time. It's not like the Masorites came out of nowhere and said, oh, let's put vowel dots. Okay. Okay. So now we get into Mishnaic Hebrew. The Mishnah, as I told you, was written in 200 AD. It is the oral laws that the Pharisees spoke, that they actually wrote down in 200 AD. And here's a section of the Mishnah. What looks familiar to you? What's familiar? What language is this? Yeah, it's the Masoretic Text with the dashes and the lines. And I said, wait a second. So I thought that in 1000 AD, the Masoretic Text was finished. So how can this be the Mishnah written in 200 AD? How can this be the same text? Well, if you look here, it says a few lines of text from the Kabbalah manuscript, which is considered to be the most important manuscript of the Jewish Mishnah. The manuscript is dated approximately to the 12th century. Okay. I tried to find a Mishnah that was written previous to the 12th century that I could actually see, to see what the Hebrew letters were and compare them to the Masoretic Text. Can't find it. They don't exist. They're lost. So this is the oldest Mishnah text, which they call Mishnaic Hebrew. That's what it's called on Wikipedia, if you want to trust Wikipedia. And that's what they call the Mishnaic Hebrew. But it's not. It's the Masoretic Text. So the question is, what is the original Mishnah written in? If it was written in 200 AD, what was it written in? Well, obviously Hebrew, but what did it look like? We'll never know. So, once again, we only have about the 12th century AD or in the Leningrad Codex of showing us the Masoretic Text was the only quote-unquote Hebrew that around. There's nothing else that I can find earlier than around that time period. So at least so far. Okay. So now I'm going to show you what my beliefs are based on what I'm showing you so far, the conclusions I'm coming to. And that is that the modern day Pharisee Masorites came to the text that we see based on the Aramaic. They took the Aramaic letters and they formed a made-up Hebrew language. And I'll show you. So we're going to scroll down here. Okay. So real quick, these letters here are variations of Syriac, the Syrian alphabet. Okay, here's the alphabet, the Aleph, Bet, Gamel. It's very similar to how it's worded in quote-unquote Hebrew. So here's the Phoenician equivalents of these letters, this Aleph going across. Here's the Aramaic, and here's the Hebrew. And I'm going to show you of these different letters. The Aramaic is the closest to the Hebrew. And it's my belief that the Masoretic Text is based on Aramaic. And I found a website, which for the life of me I can't find right now, that even said that the Masoretic Text is based on Aramaic. So if you look here and here, these are very similar as compared to this Phoenician equivalent, which, by the way, Paleo-Hebrew, if I lined it up here next to the Phoenician, it's the exact same alphabet. Paleo-Hebrew and Phoenician are exactly the same. So how do we know which one's Paleo-Hebrew and which one is Phoenician? We don't, because they're exactly the same. It's like saying I have an A written in English, American English, and I have the letter A written in British English from England. And I compare the two A's, and they're the same. And I tell you, well, one is American English and one is British English. One is Paleo-Hebrew and one is Phoenician. I mean, you know, my point is, I even question where they're coming up with the Paleo-Hebrew and saying it's Paleo-Hebrew. But that's not the subject of this video. We're going to just stick to the Masoretic text. So here's an Aramaic, second letter, Hebrew. Okay. This is very similar too to this, except it has a little thing on the top. Aramaic. Look how similar that is. Okay. Little dissimilar there. Kind of dissimilar there. Little dissimilar there. But look at this. Virtually the same letters as compared to the Paleo-Hebrew Phoenician. And look, the Assyrian isn't even close. Okay. Phoenician, Aramaic, Hebrew. Look how close that is. That's not close. Those aren't even close. These two are fairly close. Almost the same, except it has another line there. Okay. Almost the same compared to this one. Yeah, pretty much the same, except that has an extra one. A little different. Here's a P. That looks almost like a P. Okay. Look at this. This W. Look here in the Aramaic. Look at that. Almost the same. And look, almost the same. So, not every single letter, obviously, in Aramaic is exactly like Hebrew, but it looks very similar compared to others that I've showed you. So I just came to the conclusion on my own that that's where they derived it from. Because I don't know, besides Paleo-Hebrew, which looks nothing like the Masoretic text, where they came up with this Masoretic text. Because as I said, as I showed you, where that Septuagint, those scrolls and scriptures came from, the Hebrew, is gone to translate the Septuagint into Greek. Okay. All right, so now we're going to get into the Kabbalah, because this is where it ties all together with the Pharisees, the Masorites, and the Kabbalah. This was the question I had asked the Lord. And I had actually posed it to two people who I've come to know over time through YouTube, who also make videos on their channels. And I posed this question to them. And they helped me in doing this research, and I helped them by showing them what I showed them and doing their own research on things similar to this topic that they have reported on their channels, whether it's video or on their website. Okay, one is Trevor Davis with Sounding the Alarm, his YouTube channel, and the other one is Dolly Webber, and her channel is called Song of the Bride. And I've talked about both of them before. I've actually linked on my other videos some of their videos that to show you guys. on my video descriptions. Great people. Just love the Lord. I'm blessed to know them. And they are keen to expose His truth about the Masoretes and other things regarding the Masoretes and Rabbinic Judaism to you guys. So I highly recommend their channels. And yeah, so anyway, back to what I was saying. That was the question I posed to them and to the Lord. What if any, correlation is there between the Kabbalah and the Masoretes? And this is what He showed me. He kept telling me to go to the Masoretic Text itself, because I would get overwhelmed because there was so much information coming in and I didn't know how to organize it and get through it, and I was getting very overwhelmed. And He always kept telling me to go to the Masoretic Text itself and look at it and focus on that. And I didn't understand what He meant at the time, but I sure do now, and I'm going to show you. But before we go there, I'm going to show you the Kabbalah. Briefly talk about it, okay? Kabbalah is an esoteric method, discipline, and school of thought in Jewish mysticism. Okay? Jewish Kabbalah is a set of esoteric teachings meant to explain the relationship between the unchanging, eternal God, the mysterious Ein Sof, the infinite, and the mortal, finite universe, God's creation. It forms the foundation of mystical religious interpretations within Judaism. Notice this has nothing to do with the scriptures. Okay, so let me go down here so we don't take too much longer. Origins. According to the traditional Kabbalistic understanding, Kabbalah dates from Eden. It came down from a remote past as a revelation to elect righteous people, and for the most part was preserved only by a privileged few. Talmudic Judaism, which is Rabbinic Judaism, same thing. Rabbis study the Talmud, oral Torah, records its views of the proper protocol for teaching secrets in the Talmud. There it is. Tractate Hagiga, which is one of the tractates of the Mishnah, and I told you the Mishnah is part of the Torah. Modern day Pharisees. This is what it states. One should not teach the work of creation, which is literally work of creation and work of the chariot are terms used in the Talmud for the esoteric doctrine of the universe or for parts of it. Okay? Secret knowledge within the Talmud. Impairs nor the work of the chariot to an individual unless he is wise and can understand the implications himself, etc. Contemporary scholarship suggests that various schools of Jewish esotericism arose at different periods of Jewish history, each reflecting not only prior forms of mysticism but also the intellectual and cultural milieu of that historical period. Okay. Here it says, originally, Kabbalistic knowledge was believed to be an integral part of the oral Torah. Okay, oral Torah, let's be clear here, it's not the 10 Commandments given to Moses. It's the oral law, which they claim was given to Moses by God on Mount Sinai around the 13th century BC, according to its followers, although some believe that the Kabbalah began with Adam. See here. According to Rabbinic Judaism, the oral Torah or oral law are statutes and legal interpretations that were not recorded in the 5 books of Moses, which is the written Torah, and which are regarded by Orthodox Jews as prescriptive and given at the same time. Boom. If this doesn't raise the last of the many red flags that should have been raised by you, a follower of Jesus Christ, then I don't know what else will. About the Masoretes and their Masoretic text. Okay? They practice Kabbalah, which is magic, hidden knowledge, esoteric teachings, which is magic. That's what it is. And I could really get into what the Kabbalah teaches, but that's another time. It's another video, and I am going to make it, because all Christians need to know about this, what the rabbinical Jews really do believe. Okay, so here's one of the books of the Kabbalah. I'm going to the very end because this is the most important part that ties it all together, that shows you how the Masoretes developed a magical language they call the Masoretic Text and pass it off as Hebrew. Here it is. The reference to each letter, and he attached a crown to it, the letter meaning they're referring to the Hebrew, fake, quote-unquote, fake Hebrew letters, conforms to an ancient principle of happy memory. One tradition of the letters is that they have been revealed with ornaments and crowns. As it is said, 7 letters necessitate 3 adornments. So here's some of the letters of the Hebrew, quote-unquote, Hebrew alphabet. And look at this. This Menachot 29b. Guess where this comes from? It's a tractate in the Talmud. So there, once again, is another connection between the Kabbalah and the Talmud, between the Masoretes and their Masoretic text and the Pharisees. It is the same for each letter. For some letters, these adornments augment, and for others, they restrain the deductions drawn from them, as the Book of Crowns has explained. The ancients also had the tradition that when the crowns are not carefully written in the Torah, that's their Talmud, it is forbidden to pronounce benedictions upon it, and it is not permitted to read it in public. For this reason, they say that one who hastily rushes through it will not live long. The ancient amulet makers say that the letters are worthless if they have not been written with their crowns. Similarly, our author says that it is not possible to form the triangular, square, folded, chain-formed, or convex figures which the letters were meant to form, okay, which these letters are the Masoretic text, okay, which they form without a crown. He says, therefore, that he attached a crown to it. Okay, so here's the Masoretic text, what they pass off as Hebrew. I showed you how I believe, and others, because I can't find the websites right now, but I saw them, see the correlation between Aramaic and the Masoretic text. Okay? But watch this. So, what do they mean by attaching a crown to it, written with their crowns? Okay, I'm going to show you. So here I showed you this chart earlier. Let me blow this up a little. Okay. Here is the Hebrew right here. So here's the Aleph, or however you say it. Okay. You don't see anything up at the top or at the bottom because there's no crowns on it. But now there is. Masoretic text, Aleph. See here and here? Those are the crowns that I just read to you out of the Kabbalah. That's what they're talking about. And I'll prove it in a minute. This is what the Lord showed me. This is why he said, look at the Masoretic text itself. And I didn't understand what he meant, but now I do. Thank you, Father. Thank you, Jesus, for showing this to me. And I hope this benefits all of you. Okay. Okay. So there's the Aleph. Okay. So here's another one. The bet, maybe you can see it is not as clear, but we'll go through it. There's some that are going to be more clear than others. There's the bet. See up there? It's a little thicker, and it's got the little end piece there, and it's not really there. See? We'll find a couple more. I'm going to scroll down a little bit. Here's the hey. There's the N. See, it's just kind of plain. There's nothing on the top or the bottoms. There's the hay. See on the top there? These little parts here and up here. And even on here, the dalet. These are the crowns. This is what they're talking about in the Kabbalah. This is what the Masoretes added and called it their Masoretic Text. Okay, let's go to the shin. This one's very clear. See these up here? Look at this. Let me go down to the shin. Sorry, guys. Look at that. That's without the thing, the crowns on the top. There it is without the crowns. And then here it is with the crowns. See it there? Added the crowns. You can say the same for these two. These look like Y's, Sadi, and then the AN, which is actually a little different here. The how you say it. Okay, here it is. They say A instead of AN. But see, there's no crowns on the top there. And here, the Sadi or the Yetzi or whatever it is, there's nothing on the top there. See? But there is the here. There it is here. And there it is here. Okay? So I'm going to prove it to you. I found this web page written by a rabbi talking about the crowns on the Torah's letters. I kid you not. I've read that some of the Hebrew letters have crowns drawn on top of them when they're written in the Torah. Which letters does that apply to? What do they look like? And what is the purpose of the crowns? Ayish Rabbi replies, "Thank you for raising the interesting issue. As you wrote, some of the letters, when written in the Torah, have tiny lines rounding at the top, protruding from the tops of them, just like I showed you guys, that the Lord showed me. These lines look a bit like a crown and accordingly called tagan in Hebrew. Taga is Aramaic, no surprise, for crown. The letters which contain crowns made of 3 lines are Shin, I showed you that W, look at the top, see it's got those little things on the top? The An, that Y I showed you, the Tet, the Nun, the Zan, the Gimel, okay, the Zadi, which is like a Y, I showed you that on the top. Okay, they're there. There's the proof by a rabbi. So what does that tell us? It tells us, it's just more proof, that the Masorites made up their text stemming from Aramaic, added crowns from the Kabbalah, because the Kabbalah is part of the Talmud, and the Talmud was in the academies being studied by the Masorites who wrote in the academies, who were rabbis, and there's your connection. Ta-da! Pretty out there and crazy, isn't it? So once again, of the many, many, many red flags that I have showed you in this video that have been raised, here's the big one. Because the Kabbalah, which these crowns are derived from, on top of the Masoretic text, on their alphabet letters, passed off as Hebrew, is magic, esotericism, mysticism, based on an Ein Sof, which is not the God of the Bible. And last but not least, this is a video, Modern Hebrew and the Jewish Experienced Rabbi interviews another rabbi. Okay, this rabbi here is being interviewed, and he says in the interview several times that the Masoretic text is an engineered language. I kid you not. And I found a website where I found the same thing, that it was an invented language. I found it. It was on this website right here. That's Bible .ca, okay, talked about it. But this comes straight from the rabbi. He actually admits it. It's an engineered language. Masoretic text. Well, it's obvious. I showed you. So yeah, I mean, pray about this. You can ask the Lord to show you what he needs to show you. You can do your own research if you don't believe me. But that's why I laid it out for you in these tabs, because it's right in front of your face. It's right there. And once again, we should have stopped right here when I showed you who the rabbinic Jews are and who the Masorites are. That should have been enough to stop all of us from reading from the modern day Pharisees, anything that comes from the modern day Pharisees, because they're children of hell. And they have a magical language that they have passed off as Hebrew that you are now reading from in your Old Testament. Yeah. Pretty crazy.